There's a quiet moment that comes for many people, not always dramatic, not always loud, but deeply significant. It's the moment you turn 65. And for some, it feels like a finish line. For others, it feels like a beginning. But in reality, it's neither. It's a transition point, one that changes more than most people realize. Because turning 65 isn't just about getting older. It's about stepping into a new financial phase, one filled with opportunities, responsibilities, and yes, a few hidden traps that can quietly cost you more than you expect if you're not paying attention. I've spent years listening to people right at this stage, and what I hear over and over again is a version of the same assumption. Okay, I'm 65 now, Medicare kicks in, maybe I'll think about Social Security, and that's about it. But that's not the full story, not even close, because what actually happens at 65 is far more layered and far more important than most people realize. There are benefits that quietly unlock, rules that suddenly shift, penalties that disappear, and others that begin. And if you don't understand how all of these pieces fit together, you can unintentionally leave money on the table, or worse, make decisions that affect your financial security for decades. So today, I want to walk you through this moment in a way that feels clear, grounded, and empowering. Not overwhelming, not rushed, just honest. Let's begin with the one most people think they understand, but often don't fully get right: Medicare. Now, on the surface, Medicare seems straightforward. You turn 65, you enroll, and you're covered. But the truth is, timing here matters more than people expect, because Medicare doesn't just begin automatically for everyone. Yes, if you're already receiving Social Security benefits, enrollment happens for you. But if you're not, and many people aren't, you need to actively enroll yourself. And here's where things get a little delicate. There's a specific window, your initial enrollment period. It begins 3 months before the month you turn 65, includes your birthday month, and extends 3 months after. 7 months in total. That may sound generous, but it passes faster than you think. And if you miss it, Medicare doesn't just say, "That's okay, you can sign up later." Instead, it quietly applies a penalty, a permanent one. For every 12 months you delay enrolling in Part B, your premium increases by 10%. And that increase doesn't go away, it stays with you for life. So this isn't just about missing a date on the calendar. It's about locking in higher costs every single year going forward. Now, there is an exception. If you're still working and covered under a qualifying employer health plan. But that coverage has to be active. It can't be COBRA. It can't be retiree coverage. And that distinction matters more than people realize. Because I've seen people assume they're covered, only to discover later that they weren't. And by then, the penalty had already begun. And this is what makes this stage of life so important. It's not just about what you know. It's about what you think you know. That may not be entirely accurate. And that brings us to the next decision, one that can feel even more overwhelming: choosing your Medicare coverage. Because once you enroll, you're faced with a choice. Do you go with Original Medicare or a Medicare Advantage plan? And on paper, this can feel like a simple comparison of costs. But in reality, it's much deeper than that. Original Medicare is the traditional government-backed coverage. It gives you broad access to doctors and specialists across the country. Pair it with a supplemental plan, and you gain a level of predictability and flexibility that many people value deeply, especially as health needs evolve. Medicare Advantage, on the other hand, is offered through private insurance companies. These plans often come with lower upfront premiums, and they may include additional benefits. But they also come with networks, prior authorizations, and restrictions that can become very real very quickly when you actually need care. And this is where I gently encourage people to pause. Because one of the most common mistakes I see is choosing a plan based solely on the monthly premium. And I understand why. We're wired to look for the lowest cost. But healthcare doesn't always follow predictable patterns, and the plan that looks cheapest today may not be the one that supports you best tomorrow. So instead of asking, what's the least expensive option right now? A more helpful question is, what kind of coverage will give me confidence if something changes in my health? Because that's really what this decision is about, peace of mind, not just savings. Now let's shift to something else that often gets misunderstood at 65, Social Security. There's a lingering belief, one that's been around for decades, that age 65 is the moment you're supposed to claim your benefits, but that's no longer the case. Full retirement age has changed. For many people turning 65 today, full retirement age is actually closer to 67, and claiming benefits at 65 means you're starting early. Now, that's not inherently wrong. There are valid reasons people choose to claim early: health concerns, lifestyle goals, financial needs. But what matters deeply is understanding the trade-off, because claiming early comes with a reduction. Let's say your full retirement benefit at 67 would be $2,500 per month. If you claim at 65 instead, that amount could drop by around 13%. That's roughly $330 less every month. And while that might not feel overwhelming in isolation, over time, it adds up. Over a year, that's nearly $4,000. Over 20 years, that's approaching $80,000. And that's before factoring in cost of living adjustments, which will now be applied to a lower base. So this isn't just a small adjustment, it's a long-term shift in your income. And again, there's no one right answer here, but there is a right awareness, because when you understand the impact, you're no longer guessing, you're deciding. And that's a very different place to be. There's an account that many people have been contributing to for years, often without fully appreciating what it can become later in life. It's called a health savings account, an HSA. And before age 65, the rules around this account are very strict. You can use the money for qualified medical expenses, and in return, you get one of the most generous tax advantages available anywhere. Your contributions go in tax-free, they grow tax-free, and when used for medical expenses, they come out tax-free. It's what some people call a triple tax benefit. But if you try to use that money for anything else before 65, a vacation, a car, helping a family member, you don't just pay taxes, you pay a penalty. And not a small one. It's 20%, which is double the early withdrawal penalty on a traditional IRA. So for years, many people treat their HSA carefully, almost cautiously, knowing that it's meant strictly for health care. But then something changes at 65. The rules soften, the penalty disappears, and suddenly that same account becomes something much more flexible. After age 65, you can withdraw money from your HSA for non-medical expenses without facing that 20% penalty. You'll still pay income tax, just like you would with a traditional IRA, but the punishment is gone. And that changes how this account fits into your financial life. Because now, your HSA isn't just a healthcare account. It's also a backup retirement account, a quiet reserve, a source of flexibility. If you use it for medical expenses, it remains completely tax-free. But if you don't need it for that purpose, it can still support your lifestyle without penalties. And that dual purpose is incredibly valuable, especially in retirement, where flexibility often matters just as much as income. Now let's talk about something that almost feels hidden, not because it's secret, but because so few people seem to know it exists. A new tax deduction for people age 65 and older. And this one is meaningful because it has the potential to reduce how much of your income is actually taxed, sometimes by a significant amount. Here's how it works. There has always been an additional standard deduction for people over 65. That part isn't new. But now there's something extra layered on top. An additional bonus deduction, $6,000 per person, which means if you're married and both of you are 65 or older, that's $12,000. And this stacks on top of the existing deductions. So when you start adding everything together, the standard deduction, the age-based increase, and this new bonus, you could be looking at a substantial portion of your income being shielded from taxes. In some cases, tens of thousands of dollars. And what makes this particularly powerful is that it applies whether you take the standard deduction or itemize. It's not an either-or situation, it's an addition. But like many things in the tax world, there are boundaries. This benefit begins to phase out once your income crosses certain thresholds, and eventually it disappears entirely for higher income households. Still, for a large number of retirees, this creates an opportunity to manage income more thoughtfully, to potentially reduce taxes, and to make retirement income stretch just a little bit further. But here's the part that's easy to miss. This deduction is temporary. As it stands, it's available for a limited number of years unless extended. So it's not just about knowing it exists, it's about recognizing that timing matters here too. And now we come to the part that I want you to pay very close attention to, because this is where I've seen people make mistakes, not because they were careless, but because the rule itself is so unintuitive. It's what's known as the HSA backdating trap, and it can create penalties that quietly follow you year after year if you're not careful. Here's the situation. Once you enroll in Medicare, you are no longer allowed to contribute to your HSA. That part is straightforward. But what's not obvious is that Medicare coverage can be applied retroactively, going back up to 6 months from the time you enroll. So even if you sign up today, Medicare may treat you as though you were covered months earlier. And that's where the problem begins. Because if you made HSA contributions during that retroactive period, those contributions are now considered excess. And excess contributions come with a penalty, 6%, every year for as long as that money remains in the account. And this isn't a one-time fee. It repeats year after year until the excess is corrected. So what might seem like a small oversight, just continuing your normal contributions, can quietly turn into an ongoing cost. And the frustrating part is, no one sends you a warning. There's no alert, no reminder, just a rule, waiting to be discovered after the fact. So what does all of this really mean? It means that turning 65 isn't just a milestone. It's a moment of alignment, a point where multiple parts of your financial life begin to intersect: healthcare, taxes, retirement income, saving strategies. And when those pieces align well, the result is something powerful: clarity, confidence, a sense that you're not just reacting to retirement, but actively shaping it. But when those pieces are misunderstood or overlooked, the opposite can happen. Missed opportunities, unexpected costs, decisions that feel rushed or incomplete. And that's why this stage deserves your attention. Not fear, not stress, just attention. Because the truth is, you don't need to get everything perfect. You just need to be aware enough to make thoughtful choices, to ask questions, to slow down where it matters, and to recognize that this isn't about getting older. It's about getting wiser with the resources you've spent a lifetime building. If there's one thing I hope you take from all of this, it's this: turning 65 doesn't close a chapter, it opens a new one. And like any new chapter, it comes with both opportunity and responsibility. But with the right understanding, it can also come with something even more valuable: peace of mind. The kind that comes from knowing you're making decisions not out of habit or assumption, but from a place of clarity. And that makes all the difference.